After months of waiting, the federal government just came out with their Colorado River water allocation cuts. And it looks like Nevada is maybe kind of doing okay, but also maybe not. Here in Las Vegas, water is so important, but also it's all very confusing. So today on CityCast Las Vegas, we've got environmental reporter and water watcher Daniel Rothberg here to explain it to us like we're 5. It's Wednesday, August 21st. I'm David Figler, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Okay, Daniel, I know a big federal water decision came down last Thursday, but I've been looking at these headlines, and some say the shortage has triggered a 7% cut in Nevada, and some of them say, no, it's all good, no big deal, no change. I'm confused. What is it?
So kind of both. And as you know,
Great. Thank you, Daniel.
Water is, yeah, as you mentioned in your intro, extremely complicated because there's all this accounting that goes into it. But essentially, Nevada, under the shortage rules for the Colorado River, the base allocation for the state of Nevada will be cut. And that's true also for Arizona and Mexico under the drought plan for the Colorado River. But the good news, and why I wouldn't say it doesn't matter, but the good news is Nevada, you can kind of think of it as Las Vegas is already sort of pre-conserved. They're actually using less water than the total allocation. And they're using less water than the cuts.
That's been the way for a long time, right, Daniel? I mean, That's we always brag about how efficient we are. So are you saying that the cuts, while they're coming, aren't going to hit us as hard because we're already good at the conservation side of things?
Yes, you said it better than I did.
I love the term pre-conserved. I mean, it feels like the best offense is a good defense, at least for now.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been the strategy for the past 2 decades from the Southern Nevada Water Authority, more than 2 decades. Because the fact is, it wasn't always this way. Nevada actually was using more water than they were entitled to from their Colorado River allocation. So when you add growth on top of that, the incredible amount of growth that the Las Vegas Valley has seen in the last 2 decades, there really was no other option but to conserve water.
Let's go back to the big picture here with this new decision that came down. Again, explain it to me literally like I'm 5 years old, Daniel. How has management of the Colorado River changed over the last few years?
Yeah. So in 2007, the Colorado River states agreed to shortage guidelines, basically cuts that would kick in if the river's 2 main reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, dropped below certain thresholds.
What generally is that threshold?
Well, it's really, as I said, all things with water are complicated. So there's actually several different thresholds or tiers. Okay. You know, as things escalated a lot faster than people predicted in 2007, there was a much deeper drought. There was much more severe arid climate conditions on the river. The states came back and they basically added to this plan and passed what's known as a drought contingency plan in, I believe, 2019.
Are we seeing more cooperation between the states, or did the federal government really need to step in to make sure that kind of cooperation was happening?
I think that there's been a tremendous amount of cooperation in the past few years, but I also think that ebbs and flows. And I think
Pun intended. Come on. Ebbs and flows. Dude, that was good.
I think the dynamic looks something like this. Like there's cooperation, knowing that the federal government is there and prepared to step in with a potentially more unforgiving, severe, one-size-fits-all strategy for what should be done. So I think the thinking has been in this pattern, like it is better for us to do a negotiation and work within a more collaborative framework so that we can balance our interests on a more negotiated level rather than having the federal government come in and do something unilaterally.
And the unilateral is the stick, right? They say, if you don't figure this stuff out, we're going to figure it out for you and everyone's going to hate it. Are they really willing to pull that trigger? Or is this just a threat we've just heard year after year without it actually happening?
I think the federal government is ready to pull that trigger, but I also think that there's many different ways in which they are legally obligated to pull that trigger if conditions got bad enough on the river.
You know, Daniel, I want to ask some, like, I don't know, water insider gossip. Which states are better at cooperating and which ones are the bullies?
Well, I think that has a lot to do with the composition of each state, where the water is going in each state. So, for example, Nevada's Colorado River allocation is pretty simple and it's pretty much settled. The Southern Nevada Water Authority controls most of the state's allocation. So that gives them a lot of ability to act with one voice, more
Hmm.
or less. That's not the case in Arizona or California, where you have a lot of irrigated agriculture and you also have huge metropolitan areas. And you also have indigenous communities where a lot of tribal water rights have not been historically settled, and those communities have not been given a seat at the table. So I am hesitant to single out any one state because the
Because they
way
might
that
be listening and you don't want Arizona mad at you, Daniel. God
I mean,
forbid.
I don't really care about that, but I don't want to single out any one state because what is really interesting about the Colorado River and reporting on it is that these roles sort of change over time. Um, a lot of people would have probably said Nevada was the big bully a couple of years ago when they were trying to get the states to come to the table and agree to significant cuts. And Nevada kind of had to be the voice in the room that was sort of putting their foot down and saying, no, everybody needs to come to the table and everybody needs to cut. But,
Well, that
you
was
know,
because Nevada had been historically screwed because of the really unscientific and inaccurate predictions when the first Colorado River Accords were settled. So it was not necessarily Nevada being a bully, I'm going to say, defending my home state, my friend, but like saying, "Hey, we need to refigure this because it's completely unfair." So they were kind of like complaining that they had been bullied.
yeah, I meant a couple of years ago when the federal government asked the states to make these voluntary cuts.
Right.
I think it actually had less to do with Nevada's historical allocation and the historical allocation in the lower basin overall and how the priority system works, where, certain water rights have a priority and are kind of protected from cuts. How do you square that with a situation where everybody needs to cut and where if you cut off all the water to all of the cities, you would still not fix the problem? And so Nevada kind of had to be the voice there. But, in other cases, sometimes it's California, where all of the ire is directed, and sometimes it's Arizona. So, and sometimes it's Colorado. So these roles kind of shift over time, which is really interesting. And I would say kind of the alliances on the river and mutual interests shift over time as well. Sometimes you see the states aligned with each other based on where they are geographically. Sometimes you see different interests within states aligned with each other based on what sector they represent, whether that's agriculture or municipal or industrial. So it's really a shifting kind of picture, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
No, I mean, what I'm hearing is that water rights make strange river bedfellows.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, you're right that finger pointing has been happening for a really long time here in Nevada. I mean, we definitely look at those water guzzling Californians and their precious almonds as completely screwing up everything for everyone. Are they getting better?
I think so. So California has senior water rights. So they get a priority to water when there's not enough water to go around. So traditionally, like in 2007, they were not part of these shortage agreements because they took the position and felt like they did not need to cut under the doctrine of prior appropriation under the law, even though they're the largest user by state downstream of the Hoover Dam.
Definition of a bully.
Well, it gets more complicated, right? Because California had been overusing its water. It had already gone through this complicated process of cutting back. The local politics of that were complicated, difficult. It's always difficult to use less water. It's a really hard thing. So, but sure, I don't know if I want to say they're a bully, but you can say
Fair.
they're a
Okay.
bully.
But what's changed now? Because
What's changed is
yeah.
that California has really come to the table in several different ways. First, for the drought contingency plan in 2019, California put water on the table. Not immediately, not in the first tier, but they said if the conditions on the river reach a really severe threshold in Lake Mead, we will put water on the table, we will conserve. Since then, California has been part of a lot of conservation water sharing agreements. Most recently, I believe just last week, the Imperial Irrigation District in Southern California, which is the largest single water user on the river and has, again, priority rights to use that water voluntarily for a lot of money, said we will conserve X amount per year to get through 2026.
Now, you say for a lot of money, that means the feds are paying them to voluntarily come to the table?
Correct.
Okay, so a little bribery. Well, Imperial Valley says the biggest water user. Why are they using so much water in Imperial Valley? I'm curious.
There's a mix of a lot of irrigated agriculture. They're growing alfalfa, forage, but they're also growing something like 2/3 of, winter veggies, broccoli, lettuce, all sorts of vegetables come from the Imperial Valley. So it's quite likely if you're in the grocery store in the winter, you're eating vegetables that were produced with Colorado River water.
Okay, well, now you got me thinking that maybe we should point out our own hypocrisy that we're so mad at Imperial Valley for using all that water, but it looks like Southern Nevada gets the majority of this kind of produce from California. So should we maybe be worried about their cutbacks? Are we going to have less veg available?
Yeah, I think that's a question of how producers adapt. Using less water can have an impact on yields and things like that, but it also could mean paying for more efficient irrigation systems or things like that. I think it will be interesting to see what is grown, what the effects are. But yeah, I do think that's something that should be a part of the conversation and part of these considerations when you're looking at reducing water use in agriculture.
Okay, Daniel. So now here's like my final takeaway question. We live in Las Vegas. Everyone says one of the biggest concerns is water. We hear that. I think it's pretty much ingrained now. We also hear we're doing okay and we're going to be fine. We're going to be able to move on. Water shouldn't slow what we're doing. So are we okay or are we not?
I think the whole West and Southwest needs to be asking that question, to be honest with you. I think that we created a system that even without climate change as a whole, we allocated more rights to water than there is water to go around. Las Vegas gets 90% of its water from the Colorado River. And if the Colorado River is not healthy, Las Vegas is going to be in a precarious situation. That's why Southern Nevada, even though it only has, a very small allocation from the Colorado River, is so active in these negotiations about how the Colorado River is going to be used in the future. It's interesting. Just this morning, I was reading over some of the old Nevada state water plans, starting in the 60s and 70s, and then looking at the most recent one, which came out 25 years ago in 1999.
Yeah, fun light reading.
Fun light reading.
You nerd,
yeah,
like me.
Total nerd. And they're talking about the same issues that we're talking about today. What is the future going to look like? How do you adapt? And what are viable options for moving forward? My philosophy about this as a journalist is my bias, and as somebody who works in the information communication space, is that we need to be having conversations about the trade-offs, the costs, the benefits, what it means to do deep conservation like the Southern Nevada Water Authority is proposing, what the costs are, what the effects are, and what the future might look like. There's a lot of innovative stuff that's going on the Colorado River. Southern Nevada is investing in this wastewater treatment plant in Los Angeles that has a lot of promise that could free up some water for for Southern Nevada to take from the river. And Las Vegas has made a lot of investments. The third straw was a really huge infrastructure project and investment, but it makes Las Vegas a lot more secure on the river.
That's getting water directly from Lake Mead with what we call the third straw.
Yeah, it would
Pipeline,
make Las Vegas the only, or Nevada, the only state that could get water from the Colorado River if we got to the day that water could not pass through the Hoover Dam, a situation known as dead pull. And so, Las Vegas has done a lot, has made a lot of investments, but it's always going to be a conversation. It's always going to be an issue, and it always has been. It always has been since the 1940s when, the state dispatched scientists to study what was going on, depletion in the Las Vegas groundwater aquifer. It's always been an issue, and I think it will always continue to be an issue, especially as the climate changes and everybody in the Southwest, in the West, and on the Colorado River figures out how to adapt.
So I'm hearing we need to be concerned, but mainly because we need to be thinking bigger and regionally.
Yeah, I think that's right. One thing I found with water is I find that it's kind of the default way that people talk about growth.
Yeah.
A lot of what I hear when people are talking about water doesn't have to do with water necessarily. It has to do with traffic. It has to do with housing. It has to do with whether the physical and soft infrastructure is capable of absorbing more growth. And I think those are important questions to have. But I guess my point is, I think the growth conversation, it includes water. It's about water, but it's not just about water. And when I hear people start with water, they often end up talking about traffic. They often end up talking about all of these other issues. And I think the growth conversation should be comprehensive. It should look at water, and it should also look at other things that have to do with quality of life and soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure.
Daniel, I think that the 1960s Governor Grant Sawyer gives his ghostly approval to this podcast because we are having that conversation that has been presaged for many, many decades.
Yeah, well, he was under a lot of pressure to approve more groundwater development. But I mean, that speaks to the realities of Western water. These politicians are under a lot of pressure. There's always growth pressure. There's always demand, and there's more competition for water. And I think the more the public can be involved in the conversation, the more the public can have a say about growth, how it happens, on what terms, the better. But these pressures have been weighing down for years and years and years. I think there's a recognition now that everybody needs to live within their means and use less. And, Las Vegas has adapted in a way and has led the way in using less water. And I think other cities are starting to do the same, but there's definitely a recognition that, to deal with the pressures of continued growth across the Southwest, to deal with the competition for water, to correct some of the injustices that have occurred in the past in ignoring the environment and ignoring indigenous communities' claims to water, everybody has to use less. And I think that's the reality that the Colorado River is facing, and that's the reality that a lot of places are facing.
Daniel Rothberg, thanks so much for joining us on CityCast Las Vegas to wade through these very treacherous waters.
Always happy to. Thanks, David.
That's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, we ask you to tell a friend. You can also rate our show with 5 stars if you feel that's appropriate, which, by the way, it is. Leave us a review, too, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Till then, stay lucky.
I try my best. The water puns, they come naturally.
Yeah. They just spring out of you.
They spring out. Yeah.
They flow.
They flow.